Well, happy noon. Great to see everybody here. And we have a bunch of folks signing up. It's actually pretty cool. We
Yeah.
have people from around the country. Appreciate everybody joining us. I'm Lance LoRusso. I'm an attorney in Atlanta, and I am the general counsel for the Georgia Fraternal Order of Police. I'm also the founder of the Blue Line Lawyer Institute. And today we're going to have a webinar talking about legislative efforts in Georgia and legislative efforts and how you can be successful in the legislature generally. And with me, I'm very honored to have Chloe Strickland Teams, who works with us. Chloe started with us as I guess, a part-time receptionist when you were in college, and she has advanced now. We question her judgment, but she's been with us for a long time. So tell us a little bit about your role at LoRusso Law Firm.
Yes, so I started as a receptionist when I was in college, and once I graduated, I transitioned into a paralegal role. Now I'm a law student, I'm a paralegal, and yeah, just doing all the things and learning and hanging out at the firm.
And a law student of some renown. You're on Law Review and an
Yes.
editor in the Law Review at John Marshall. So we're very
Yes.
proud of her. And we have a special guest with us today that I'm going to let Chloe introduce. Very honored to be able to introduce this person.
Yes, we have a VIB with us today. This person might look a little familiar to you guys, but we have Mr. Bill from Schoolhouse Rock. Sorry in advance for getting this song stuck in your head for the rest of the day today, but here he is to hang out with us today.
And he was very lonely. He was a lonely old Bill.
He
but
was.
For what we're going to talk about today, show us his promotion.
He's promoted to a law.
Yes.
So big things happening.
And yes, we brought this plush toy that my team gave me when we got our immunity bill passed last year. We brought it to the governor's office to the signing. And we have a picture of our current Attorney General, Chris Carr, taking a picture with him. And we very much appreciate his patience and playing along. As you know, LoRusso Law Firm is a firm that serves law enforcement officers, public safety throughout the state of Georgia. I'm licensed in Georgia, Tennessee, and Arkansas. So we handle cases around the country when we can participate and help other lawyers, really just putting out information that will keep our first responders safe. The Blue Line Lawyer Institute is a think tank for law enforcement officers and their attorneys, people who support them. I told you I'm the general counsel for the Georgia Fraternal Order of Police. We do a lot of work with the FOP in Georgia and other states around the United States. We have 9 lawyers and 6 paralegals, including Chloe. And here's some information on contacting us, and we'll have this information up. And I want to remind you too, don't worry about trying to scribble information down. We're going to have some show notes for you, some that were prepared by Chloe, and that's why they're coherent and the spelling has been checked very well, just to kind of break down some of these bills for you. Want to talk about our Force Forum. We'll be having the dates you can see there, April 21st to the 23rd, 2026. That will be our 5th Force Forum. Typically, we have people from 16 to 20 states, every level of law enforcement, city, state, federal, and just a really great opportunity to bring speakers in that you might not be able to hear anywhere else. We do have an FOP discount, and you can use the QR code to join us. So let's talk a little bit about our disclaimer, because every law firm has to have a disclaimer. We also have our YouTube channel, so if you can pop up the YouTube channel, I want to show that first. I missed that. That was my error. We do have a law firm YouTube channel where we will post oral arguments, we'll post civil service board hearings, and different opportunities for you to see how the sausage is made, if you will, what actually happens. And Chloe's been fortunate enough to be at a lot of our cases, but it's different when you're actually seeing it in court, isn't it?
Yes, much different. There's a lot of prep work that goes into that. So.
And like with the oral argument, there's one there from the Arkansas Court of Appeals I was fortunate enough to do for a very, very awesome officer in Little Rock. But, you know, that's 20 minutes. So it's a good opportunity to kind of be able to break these down and see them. And every law firm has to have a disclaimer. And Chloe gets to read the disclaimer. Why?
Because you don't want to.
Because I don't want to. So that'd be a good reason for Chloe to be able to do this.
Awesome. Okay, so the legal disclaimer says the information provided on this webinar does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. Instead, all information, content, and materials presented are for general informational purposes only. Any references to state law are for illustrative purposes only. You should contact a licensed attorney in your state to obtain advice with respect to any particular legal matter.
Very well done.
Thank you.
Better than I would have done it, actually. So, you know, the interesting thing about the disclaimer, it kind of brings us to another issue. If you don't have a lawyer, if you're in law enforcement, you don't have a lawyer that you can go to and ask questions of, then you need one. Either with your FOP or with your agency or just locally find someone who can help answer questions. We're going to email you all of the data and all of the white papers, but you still may have a question. We did a white paper on Barnes versus Felix, U.S. Supreme Court case, very detailed, but I could see officers saying, hey, I want to go beyond this and learn some more. Let's talk a little bit about our legislative efforts and how many bills are introduced every year in the legislature. Everybody hears about a few in the news, but how big a deal is that?
Yes. So this past year, there were 1,310 bills that were introduced, which is a lot.
1,300 bills introduced, and Georgia is a part-time legislature.
Yes.
So 40 days. And interestingly, there's got to be a parallel here that the flood lasted 40 days too.
Yes, that's a very interesting parallel.
Is there something of biblical proportions to that? I don't know why, but it does seem like a deluge when you're down there. And how many did the governor sign out of 1,300?
378 were signed by the governor.
So 378. Now, this is the only math you're going to see me do. That is less than 30%.
Yes. I'll let you stick with doing the math today.
Yeah, and if you think about this, less than 30%, that means a lot of bills were disregarded. Some of them, when you read them, you say, good Lord, I hope they were disregarded. And we have a couple of legislators that have been kind enough to join us. One is a very good friend to law enforcement, Brian Strickland, who is running for Attorney General in Georgia, has been instrumental in helping us in the legislature in Georgia. But there are some bills that get thrown off to the side. There's some bills that get disregarded because it wasn't the right time.
Yes.
And then as you saw going around the Capitol with us, there's bills that get merged, they get changed. So that number really is not 100% reflective because some of those good ideas may have been picked up by others.
Yes, absolutely. You see a lot of give and take and compromise in the legislative process. So if there are a couple of bills that have similar goals, they could easily merge those together and combine efforts.
And we don't want to miss anybody, but there are a couple of folks that we really want to point out that really helped us in the legislature this year. And I bring this up. Yes, this is about the Georgia legislature specifically, but if you're doing this right in your state, you should be able to write down on a napkin with a moment's notice the legislators that you can go to that you know are going to support you. We have several. Matt Reeves from up in Gwinnett helped us out. Randy Robertson, retired law enforcement officer. John Albers and Brian Strickland, as I mentioned. Who are some others that you wound up?
Also, Houston Gaines was very instrumental in the passing of some of this legislation. So yeah, we had a lot of people help us out. Yeah,
and some of them you would think, and this is where you have to build these alliances. Some of them, like Colonel Hitchens, former state patrol commander, you would think, oh, he's going to help us with bills. But there's a lot of other folks who just want to reach out and learn about law enforcement. And I want to point out the FOP Legal Defense Plan is something that we push in every one of our seminars. And a lot of this work that was down there this year and a lot of years is because of the Fraternal Order of Police working with legislators behind the scenes. And as a matter of fact, the Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act that a lot of you are aware of, the HR 218, the National Carry Bill, that was, again, a long-term process. But if you're not familiar with the FOP Legal Defense Plan, go to foplegal.com and learn about it. I think it is the best legal defense plan available for law enforcement. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of this, this going down to the Capitol and walking in that big building and saying, oh yeah, we're going to work on getting a bill passed. So you were down there for the first time this year.
Yes.
How intimidating is that?
It's a very intimidating process. Really, the first few times you go down there, every part of it can be intimidating. Finding somewhere to park, navigating your way through the different buildings, and finding the offices of different legislators. So it was really fun to navigate this past year.
And I think one of the interesting things that a lot of people forget is that these bills have to get drafted. The idea doesn't just miraculously appear. And you know, people, and I'll give you an example. People hear the Secretary of State. Well, the Secretary of State keeps the bills after they're done, but every legislature has a drafting group.
Yes.
In Georgia, we have a specific group of lawyers that legislative counsel who draft the bills. So can you talk a little bit about what it was like to say, okay, well, I got to get leg counsel to look at this?
Yes, so definitely working through some of the language in bills, you're working on drafting it, and leg counsel will look at it later before it makes its way to a committee. So that's always nice. You can get multiple sets of eyes on something.
And don't get frustrated by that process. The bill has to be in proper form. For instance, Georgia has a one subject rule. So you can't have a bill that covers a half dozen different subjects like you have on the national, where you have these omnibus bills that have tons of different topics in them. So their job is to make sure that it's drafted properly. And for the cops here that are frustrated and pulling their hair out and saying, well, why does this law say X? Words matter. The means is something different from a. Shall is different than may. A semicolon is different than a comma. So if one of the legislators looks at a bill you drafted and says, well, we need to get it to legislative council, and then they're willing to consider it, don't take it personally. This is part of the process.
Yes, there's a lot that goes into that process, and they're there to make sure everything looks perfect on their end as well, and on ours.
Yeah, and you don't want to get to a stumbling block with getting a bunch of support, and then it just gets hit at committee and say this can't go any further. So one of the things that we talk about is engaging your legislators. If your legislature is not in session right now, I would highly, highly recommend that you go find out who your legislator is.
Yes, yes. And legislative session ended on April 4th this year. So there's a good amount of time to meet with your legislator, to meet with your senator or House rep, and introduce yourself and talk to them.
Now, during the session, we had an FOP Day on the Hill, which we do quite often, I think every year for the past 15, 20 years that we've done it in Georgia. And I know a lot of states do that. But, you can run into legislators at different events. They're going to be at 4th of July picnics. You can invite them to your Kiwanis group. You can invite them to your agency. Hey, we're doing some new training. Come by. They love that. And they want to hear from you. I've been amazed, especially when I first started doing this, just how much respect there was, just overwhelmingly, for law enforcement. And you saw how law enforcement is integral to that process. Did you walk anywhere in the halls ever when you didn't see a law enforcement officer?
No, everywhere. Security checkpoints, standing in the hallway, there was always a law enforcement officer in sight.
All right, so when you go down there to talk, let's talk about our other topic, listen to everyone. Why don't you got to see that up close and personal with some of the bills from law enforcement.
Yes, I got to stand back and observe a lot of what was going on during session. You hear things and you hear maybe different opposing views, and it kind of helps you prepare to testify on these bills in a committee hearing, or talking with different legislators or people that you might need to speak with so they can understand the intention. So if you sit back and listen, you can hear a lot of information that's helpful to you.
And you have to be patient with people who disagree with you, because sometimes they disagree with you and they're never going to change their minds. And sometimes they just don't understand exactly what's going on. One of those bills we're going to talk about today.
Yes.
What about knowing your audience?
So the Georgia General Assembly website is very, very user-friendly, and I was able to get so much information on House representatives, senators, and different committees and who were on those committees just by navigating that website. So it was great for me to get on there, look at a picture of this person so I knew what they looked like in case we ran into someone in the hall.
Exactly.
Because everyone is always on the move at the Capitol. So if you can pull someone to the side quickly while they're on the way to their next stop, it can make a difference.
And knowing the backgrounds of folks. So I mentioned Colonel Hitchens,
Yes.
great friend, former law enforcement officer, Randy Robertson, former law enforcement officer. We mentioned Matt Reeves, he's a lawyer, but John Albers
Yes.
is a firefighter and has been for years. So those are that's information, and those are tidbits that help you identify with people. So let's talk about some of these issues. How do we identify issues and then kind of bring them to the forefront? Because you may have lived with it for 10 years and now you brought it to the legislature. How do you get them up to speed and understanding what you want done?
So you really have to think about simple solutions to what might be a complex problem. That's the really easiest way to navigate this process. I think keeping it simple is very important.
And how many times did you hear the term one pager when you were down there?
Oh, maybe twice a day.
Tell everybody what a one pager is.
So you're basically giving the bullet points on the purpose behind this law, the goal, and kind of what the bill operates and how it should function in theory. A one pager, so you can hand it off to a legislator and they know what they need to know about the bill and know what they can tell others.
It's basically a very, very quick way to inform somebody, and be mindful of the fact that they may hand this to one of their staffers or someone else and say, "Hey, I need more information," or they may ask you. It may generate questions.
Yes.
Another big question you should always ask when you meet with a legislator, especially about a bill: who else do I need to meet with? Now, keep in mind, they may tell you to go meet with somebody who really don't want to hear about your bill.
Yes.
And they're really not friendly to you, but that's an opportunity. You need to at least give them the opportunity to hear you out. They may not agree with you, but you'll generally find someone willing to listen.
Yes, and if questions arise in the future, then they know who they can go to have questions about the bill.
And something that you're better at than me, patience.
Yes, I'm very patient. And patience is a really big thing at the Capitol. There's so much going on. I mean, half the time when you go to the Capitol, it's like an amusement park. There's field trips everywhere. You're wondering how you can get up the stairs without knocking into someone or photobomb someone. So you have to be patient and just take a breath and know that everyone's going to get to where they're going when they need to be there.
And I was at the Capitol during the session last year when we got the immunity bill passed, when there was no one there.
Yes.
It was 6:15 in the morning.
Yes.
So that's about the
Early
only
late.
time it's not going to be crowded during the session.
Mhm.
Another thing is remaining professional. There's people on opposing viewpoints, and we had at least one bill where somebody popped up and just started opposing the bill, and it was difficult. You and I were looking at each other going, I don't think he's read it.
Yes.
And later on, it turns out he hadn't.
Yes, that's something else that happens when you're in these committee hearings. You'll have people that are concerned with the bill come and testify that don't actually really understand what's going on with the bill. So that's another prime example of being patient and letting them speak and speak with them after to hopefully quelch some of those concerns.
Now, we turned that person around.
We did.
We did. And then the other thing too is we figured out who they were before they spoke, because understanding the procedures in a committee meeting, you have to sign up ahead of time. You have to say whether you're for or against a bill. And there's nothing wrong with looking at that sign-in sheet. Oh, okay, well, Bob signed up against it. I'm going to go ask him, hey, what's your objection?
Yes. That's
the compromise that usually gets these bills passed. And with regard to that, if you're pushing it or you're helping, or even if a legislator has asked you to come, you're the director of the narcotics unit, we need to hear from you about this bill. Remember, you're the expert. You don't need to prove you're the expert, because that subject matter expertise that you have comes from years of work in law enforcement. And I can't tell you how many times we had legislators look at me and say, hey, why don't you bring some folks who have actually dealt with this issue? So other legislators can talk to them, or they can come speak to the committee.
Which is great for FOP Day on the Hill.
Absolutely. And you'll see that people kind of filter around, or they may grab you. Hey, while I'm here, let me ask you about this bill.
Yes.
So one of the things, let's talk about the summary of laws passed. And you mentioned that website. Kind of give people an idea, especially those of you all that are trainers, where your sheriff or your chief says, hey, do an update for 2025. And you're like, what am I supposed to do? Look at 1,300 bills?
Yes.
What's an easy way to do that?
So the best way to do that is to just get on the Georgia General Assembly website. I found it very user-friendly. I'm not the most technologically savvy person. So there's a search bar. You can search any certain bills that you're looking for if you've heard about a particular one. You just have to make sure you're on the correct legislative session, because those numbers change from year to year. And they make it very easy to click on headers and find out what you need. And they have a list of all of the bills that have been passed. And that's going to be included in the outline that you'll get after today's webinar.
And if you are in another state, because we have people from, I think, 12 or 15 states on here right now, which is really, really awesome. There is a corresponding website for your state. You have to know where it is, especially if you're going to track something. So I'll give you an example of where somebody got a little embarrassed when we were having a discussion.
Mhm.
I went in to speak to a legislator who was not exactly law enforcement friendly. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And I met with one of their staffers, and their staffer said, yeah, there's no way we can support this bill. And they're talking to me, and they handed me a copy. They were looking at an old version.
Mm-hmm.
So even a staffer was looking at an old version. So that website allows you to stay current. The night before you go the next morning,
Mm-hmm.
you should check and then check the following morning because you saw things change very, very quickly.
There were times when we were sitting in a particular room waiting for a committee hearing and the time would change, the location would change, and I'm like, oh, well, now we have to move, or now we have to figure out a way to be two places at once because we have two committee hearings on two different bills at the same time. So that was also something we had to navigate.
Yeah, and so let's talk a little bit about, we talked about the process, and sometimes bills don't get through, and it's very easy to get discouraged. And I want to talk about one. It's HB 390. It's the Halo bill, and it did not pass. I want to talk a little bit about why, but I also want to tell people you can't get discouraged. Georgia's legislative session is their 2-year sessions, and that has a lot to do with budgeting and when bills survive and they can be edited and things like that for the next year. But every state, finds a different way to, to skin that cat. So I think the important thing to realize is you have to know the procedures in your state. But tell everybody what the Halo bill was, why we were trying to get it passed, and we had a lot of support, but then we'll talk about how it got hung up.
Yes, the Halo bill had a lot of support this past legislative session. There are similar bills that were passed in states like Florida, Louisiana, and I know they were introduced in South Carolina. So essentially, the Halo bill would create a 25-foot radius around a first responder, where you could invoke that radius just to give you space to do your job without the concern of who's around you, if someone's in your space trying to harass you. So it really was there to provide law enforcement officers with protection if they felt they needed it.
And applied to law enforcement, EMS, firefighters. And it was a recognition, and everybody we spoke to said, okay, we understand that we don't want a 19-year-old EMT who's doing CPR to be injured or harassed or just knocked off the patient, or we've seen some folks that have been ambushed. In Idaho, we had a terrible situation where firefighters were ambushed.
Yes.
But what were some of the concerns that people came up with?
So really, some of the concerns, everyone understood that officers and public safety personnel, firefighters and EMS needed protection. No one we spoke with wanted anyone in danger. The biggest concern was balancing it out with some potential constitutional issues like the First Amendment.
Yeah, and the balancing of the First Amendment and criminal laws happens every day. If you've never been fortunate enough to go to the United States Supreme Court, the steps of the Supreme Court and the sidewalk are a very, very good distance from the front of the building. And when there's controversial bills that are being, or laws that are being debated, or cases that are up for oral argument, that area will be filled with people that are protesting. First Amendment protest is a fundamental part of our Constitution. So that wrestling match that was going forward, some of those debates really required a lot of gut checks on both sides. So I think that we eventually will get it passed. I think that the people on both sides were appropriately concerned. And this is the message to the law enforcement officers. Take a deep breath. The people that are opposing this bill are not anti-law enforcement. They just want to make sure that as a legislator, and if you think of the amazing amount of obligation that takes as a legislator, they want to make sure they don't bring a bill forward that is going to have unintended negative consequences, especially of constitutional import.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so let's talk about the ones we did get passed. So very, very excited, and I'm going to bring up a demonstrative. Chloe's in law school, so we're learning about demonstratives. So here's a good demonstrative. So when a bill gets passed, there's a lot of documents that get signed. So this is a certification from the Secretary of State that the bill actually exists. This is a list of the signatures, and here is a picture of the bill signing. Now, if you're ever involved in a legislative effort, You can go to the bill signing. A lot of times they will have ceremonies. Sometimes they're done privately. Sometimes the governor will move around the state and sign them to be with different groups. But if you really work hard on it, I encourage you to do that. This was a gift from some of our partners for our efforts.
Yes.
And this will be hanging prominently in our office. So why don't you talk about the first one, the Law Enforcement Partners Act?
Yes. So Senate Bill 99 was the Law Enforcement Partners Act. Essentially, this was a bit of a cleanup bill from some unintended effects that the repeal of citizen's arrest had. So Georgia repealed citizen arrest back in 2021, and it took away some of the authority and protections under the law that federal officers had to make arrests in assisting Georgia agencies. So essentially, this bill defined what a peace officer is and included those federal officers who were coming in to assist Georgia agencies or who were stepping in a circumstance of an emergency. And this also helps laterals. So people who are coming in from out of state, coming to work for Georgia, it gives them time and the authority to make arrests while they're finishing up their certification in Georgia.
Now, I suspect, other than the riveting conversation, I suspect a lot of the reasons why people are jumping onto this webinar, and we're excited. I think that Barbara said we were approaching 200 people. This process is the same throughout whatever state you're in. But
Yes.
the other issue is you can take good ideas from someone else's statutes. So one of the things that the Law Enforcement Officers Partners Act did was recognize, first of all, that we have federal officers running around every day in our states. They're highly trained. They want to help, and we want to make sure that if they did jump in to help or they were involved in a task force, that they were protected and they had some arrest powers. In addition, as we're seeing with the floods in Texas, nobody cares what it says on your badge.
Yes.
We just want help.
Absolutely.
And then the last thing was with the laterals. So Georgia has expanded and made it very easy for lateral officers to come here, but there is some training in just about every state that takes place. So in order to shorten that process and allow that officer that has 15 years of experience with another state, maybe their spouse got transferred from a military position, when they come to the state, they now can have arrest power, start working as a law enforcement officer, start making their field training officer process work. So that was an opportunity for us to, as you said, fix something that was an unintended consequence, but make things a little bit better. And really, the opposition that we had nothing to do with those side things we were trying to do. They were very, very small, minute changes, and really at its heart, thinking back to some of those committee meetings where people were asking questions, it was a misunderstanding of what law enforcement officers sometimes just do on a regular basis.
Yes, absolutely. So that was great progress this session.
All right, so let's talk about HB 288, the Giglio-Brady bill. Is a due process bill. A lot of talk about due process these days. Due process is notice and an opportunity to be heard. That is what due process is. But do you want to talk a little bit about that, or do you want me to jump on that one?
You can take the reins on this
All right,
one.
so the Brady versus Maryland case, 1963, out of the United States Supreme Court, talked about disclosure of material to a criminal defendant. So a prosecutor has an obligation to get exculpatory or potentially exculpatory information to a criminal defendant before the trial, so they can prepare, they can challenge witnesses. Obviously, we're talking about a Sixth Amendment right of confrontation. It's a big deal. Brady obligations can expose prosecutors to sanctions. They can also expose a conviction to a reversal. So prosecutors appropriately take it very seriously, as do defense lawyers. Now, the only time we're doing criminal defense cases if they involved use of force cases.
Yes.
So we actually do sit in the criminal defense seats. So the Giglio bill, excuse me, the Giglio case came out in 1972. We're not going to ask. I'm fond of asking people in my office where they were in 1972. I'm just not going to ask. We're just going to move on. So the Giglio case had to do with disclosing, as part of Brady, information about the background, the potential for truth or the potential for lack of telling the truth, credibility issues with the state's witnesses. Now, a lot of times people think that's law enforcement. It could just be a witness on the side of the road, and they happen to have witnessed a case They are the only witness to an armed robbery, and they're a convicted forger. Well, I would think if you're a criminal defense lawyer, you would want to know that information.
Yes.
So the Brady Giglio tug of war is something that's essential to our criminal process. But what's happening across the United States, prosecutors have to make that decision with every law enforcement case they have, every case brought by an officer. Is there anything in the officer's background that they must disclose to the defense? That happens on every case. But what we had was prosecutors independently making a decision that because they, in their sole opinion, believe the officer's testimony could be subject to challenge,
yes,
they would send a letter to the agency saying, we're never going to prosecute any of their cases, therefore they can't work as a law enforcement officer. And sadly, across the United States and in Georgia, we've had officers terminated.
yes, absolutely. We've received many calls at our firm of officers that are in this exact predicament, which now there's something that can be done about that.
Yeah, and we did not speak to anybody who didn't say this was a problem. And we worked with another agency that represents law enforcement, and then once that fire started, the Chiefs Association, the Sheriff's Association, the prosecutors, the criminal defense lawyers all recognize, okay, something has to be done. So what we put in this, and you can read this in HB 288, it's a little bit of a process. But here's what we got. Number one, there's a process now.
Yes.
There's a way for the officer to challenge that designation, because we even had an officer who was exonerated, not cleared. They were exonerated in an internal affairs. And the prosecutor said, well, you know, I think they may have done something wrong. So they weren't going to prosecute any of their cases. So now the agency has an opportunity to push the prosecutor to do a reevaluation. The agency can do their own investigation. And the prosecutor has to refer that to the Peace Officer Standards and Training Council, which will do an independent investigation of all of the facts.
Yes.
If they clear the officer, and this is what was important for us, if they clear the officer, that officer will have a document by post that says, I was cleared. There's nothing about a credibility issue with me. And then if they choose to leave that agency, get away from that DA, change to another state, we know later on in their career, go to another level of law enforcement, it's not going to hamper them. And then there's some provisions for prosecutor training as well.
Yes, yes. Prosecutors will be trained on how this bill operates. And as a law enforcement officer, credibility is so important. So now officers have a way to protect themselves against baseless claims against your credibility.
Exactly. So the oath bill.
Yes, the oath
Very,
bill.
very huge oath bill. Now, if you could just very quickly, why is the oath bill included in the Georgia Survivor Justice Act?
So the oath bill originally was not included, but you know, the last minute you got crossover day. These bills have to go through both sides of the House. The oath bill was slid into the Georgia Survivors Justice Act so that it could get through this past session.
Now, while you mentioned crossover day, and just about every state is going to have something like that. What is crossover day?
So essentially, it's where the bills that are with the Senate and the bills that are with the House switch sides and do the whole process over again. If you remember in Schoolhouse Rock, they talk about going through one side and then going to the other house and doing the exact same thing. So that's what crossover day essentially is.
You are determined to get that earworm in everybody's head.
As many times as I can.
So here's the other part of that. Because it's a limited session, it's only 40 days, there has to be time for that bill to cross over in enough time to be read 3 times in the chamber, and then go through the appropriate committees, be passed out of committee, get through the rules committee on both sides. So that's where it's important to know that process. And I'm going to brag on Chloe. She did a great job of getting up to speed, reminding me a lot of times, okay, yeah, it's still got to go through this committee, or this is where it is. Here's the chair of that committee. And how do you find out who's on these committees?
So again, I will speak to the Georgia General Assembly's website. Typically daily, they'll post agendas for their committee meetings where you can see what bills are being discussed. And you can also look at the members of that committee and see who's on there. And it's hyperlinked so you can see some facts about them in that process too.
And remember, people that are on the committee. It's very prestigious for people to sit
Mhm.
on different committees.
Yes.
And it's publicized. So you have a chair of the committee,
Mhm.
you will have a vice chair of the committee, and then you will have members of the committee.
Mhm.
Don't think that just because someone's the chair of the committee, they're not going to talk to you. A lot of
Yes.
times they're more than willing to talk to you. And then the committees will work together to see, okay, which committee should handle this bill? Should it be a committee that normally handles non-civil cases?
Mhm.
Should it be a committee that handles a budgetary item? So don't get wrapped up in that. Whatever committee it ends up in, that's the one you need to explore the backgrounds of people and then go meet with them. So getting into the oath bill.
Mhm.
So the oath bill, just about every state has a, hey, if you violate your oath of office, if you do something to commit a violation of the public trust, you should be prosecuted for that. So the one that people think about is the tax assessor that decides to go to the Bahamas and live for the rest of their life because they took a couple of $1 million out of the funds. Those are easy. What we had happening in Georgia was we had individuals who were being prosecuted for violation of oath of office, which was a felony. But the question was, what is the predicate act? So there were two issues. Number one, was a misdemeanor, a low-level misdemeanor, sufficient to charge the person with the felony charge of violation of oath of office? So all law enforcement officers, public safety officers, the clerk of court,
Mhm.
the person that stamps documents when you go in, they
Yes.
take an oath. So number one, was there a predicate act level that was appropriate? Now, we had a case in Georgia in 1993 that said officers who were charged with speeding or officers who were charged with, I think the court used the example, catching one trout over the creel limit
Yes.
should not automatically be charged with violation of oath of office because at some point there was a due process issue there. There was an excessive punishment. So with the first part of the problem was what should the predicate acts be? And what was the compromise that we came up with from the oath bill?
So essentially the compromise that we came up with was a high and aggravated misdemeanor instead of just misdemeanors and felonies. So it kind of upped the stakes on that front.
Right. So in order to be charged with the violation of oath of office, which is a felony,
Mhm.
the officer has to be charged with a high and aggravated misdemeanor or a felony. Now, just for those of you in different parts of the state who are shaking your heads, we had officers charged, and this gets to the second part of the problem.
Yes.
We had officers charged because the statute is violation of oath of office. It's not breach of public trust.
Mhm.
That's what it says. So we had officers being charged with a literal violation of a word from their oath. And the
Mhm.
problem was some of the oaths had things like, I will abide by the policies and procedures of the Chagrin Police Department.
Yes.
Well, violating a policy, and we had one person that went to a grand jury because they violated a report writing policy, and then they were charged with a felony. We got a no bill.
Yes.
But they were being, a non-crime was being used as a predicate. So when we explained this to individuals, they said, yeah, this has got to be fixed. Then the only question is to how we do it. So the first thing we did was get the high and aggravated misdemeanor or the felony predicate.
Mhm.
The second thing we did was standardize the oath. So we said, okay, you can have whatever language you want in there. And we had oaths. Chloe's going to laugh because we had oaths that I would ask the police chief, where did this language come from? And they were like, I don't know. It was in there when I took the oath, 20 years ago.
Mhm.
So we said, you can have whatever you want in your oath. You can say that, you're going to worship tree frogs and support the Constitution, whatever you want to say. But anything other than the statutory oath is aspirational.
Mhm.
And we got that. Again, this is where you need to meet with people and find out how you can get these solutions. We got that from the lawyer the bar rules and the ethics rules.
Mhm.
Some are hard and fast, and some are aspirational. So great bill. And in Georgia, when you are signing a new oath, don't cuss at me,
Don't.
but you're going to have to probably sign a new oath. And we were able to leave some provisions alone, like a sheriff has a certain oath they have to administer to their deputies. So
Yes.
they actually do 2 of them.
Awesome.
All right. So the workers' compensation bill. Workers' compensation, just let me give a little bit of an introduction.
Mhm.
Workers' compensation, as far as I know, every state has a workers' compensation statute. Workers' compensation laws are essentially no-fault statutes that are supposed to be a quid pro quo. If you are working for an employer, even if you violate the rules and you are injured, your employer will take care of you. The quid pro quo is if you are injured as part of your job, generally there's something called a workers' compensation bar and you can't sue your employer. So the difference with that is compared to a normal insurance case where, let's say you get hit by a tractor trailer, and we handle a lot of those cases, you have this body of insurance that can take care of the person. You can go after the assets of the individual. The problem is that because every employer has to take care of their employees, the amount of money available is limited. So tell us a little bit about HB 105.
So I got a couple of questions about HB 105, and I've done some research. And essentially, this bill was inspired by a Henry County deputy who was injured in the line of duty. He was receiving workers' compensation, and it was much less than what he was making as a peace officer. So his department actually did some fundraising for him, and that caught the attention of Georgia lawmakers, and this bill was born. So now under this bill, if you're an eligible peace officer, so if you were injured, severely injured or disabled, or anything that happens like that in the line of duty, you can be eligible to receive a $75,000 payment over the span of 5 years or all at once. It's just deducted by a certain percentage, and you know more about the type of percentage. You don't want to see me do math on camera.
So this is not uncommon. So, well, first of all, the amount of money available if the officer survives the incident is
$75,000.
and if they pass in the line of duty, it's
$150,000.
Okay, so these payments are made out over a period of time. Anytime you see something, especially in the law, and it's not an uncommon thing in insurance, if you see an amount paid over the law, you have a choice of getting a lump sum or waiting that 5 years for that money to grow within the state budgets and things like that, and high interest accounts that they use. So you're going to see in that bill, you can wait the 5 years, or you can get that amount discounted through a 6% discount rate. So what that's essentially doing is allowing for you to take a lesser amount now, but allowing the state to make a compensation for the fact that inflation has not raised the amount of money yet.
Couldn't have said it better.
So, well, I'm glad, because I almost made sense.
Yes.
So since we don't do math in front of people, how did you figure out what the discount rate would be on a $75,000 payment over 5 years?
So that discount is around $56,000, and I plugged the information into some AI. I used Perplexity, and it gave me an answer. So we do not have to do math on camera. And that amount for the death benefit for the $150,000 was $112,000 and some change.
And that can be paid to the estate?
Yes, paid to the estate. And again, the option to do the payments over time or upfront.
Now, some of you are sitting here, and you're right. $75,000 is not a lot of money. But for the legislature, and this is for the officers who hear all the stuff about people not liking you and all the anti-law enforcement rhetoric, do not mistake, law enforcement has the support of the general public. Don't listen to the noise. This is an example of the legislature stepping in and saying, we need to fashion a remedy. That $75,000, my gut is probably going to go up over time. And it was an opportunity for them to say, we are going to recognize that the officers that are injured need to be taken care of. Now, there's some criteria there, including an obligation for the agency. So if you are a law enforcement agency, I want you to pay attention to this one section, because if the agency recognizes that an officer is injured and they will fit the criteria, they have to notify the officer within
10 days.
Right. This is a statutory obligation. This is a shall. This is not a fixin' to. This is not if you feel like it. This is not if you can. Now, 10 days after an officer is catastrophically injured, there's a lot going on in an agency. The chief, the sheriff may be up to their arms in paperwork and shuffling things and being at the hospital and trying to take care of somebody. But within 10 days, they have to make the notifications in the bill.
Yes.
So I encourage you to look at that. And then also there's an opportunity for notification to be made to the family. This is me talking to you as a lawyer involved. We handle a lot of catastrophic injury cases. We have an officer who would qualify this. Just the other day, this occurred. Remember very clearly, the information, the best information you can have available is a liaison from the department to all of the state agencies involved, the Department of Administrative Services, the workers' comp, the family. Make sure there's somebody who can get information from the agency to the appropriate folks so the purpose of this bill can be effectuated, because it can just get lost in a family member's been injured or the agency's trying to survive the loss of an officer. Now, one part of this bill that's a little interesting, and it gives us an opportunity to talk about how appellate laws work. So separation of powers, we've been hearing a lot about that in the news. The legislature has passed this law, and the provision of the law says an officer who suffers permanent injury, temporary disability in line of duty due to a direct interaction with a criminal suspect, arrestee, or inmate. What does that mean? Well, it means things to me. Means things to you. It means things to 200 people listening. And I suspect a court will probably have to make some judgment calls there. The law may be clarified, or, you may have situations that come forward where it's crystal clear. If an officer is hit by a DUI driver, I could very much say that that person was a suspect at the time they caused the injury. But those are the opportunities that we're going to have to, we may have to wait for a little bit of interpretation. That's the magic of this process. Don't get discouraged if a bill you get passed, if one that everybody supported gets a challenge. This is where the relationships with your legislators are very, very important. Last year, we were able to get a bill amended or bill passed that amended 2 or 3 Georgia statutes because of a Georgia Supreme Court decision. So the Georgia Supreme Court interpreted a statute. It was an immunity bill. It's 16324.2, 16324.2. That case, Copeland versus the state, caused a ripple effect that I don't think anybody ever expected. We went back to the legislature. We explained the problem. We showed them the case that came out of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court was 100% right. They interpreted the statute within the 4 corners, and that language of immunity was not in the law as written. Went back, got it amended, and now you have that case, but now the statute has been amended, so the current statute would apply. Tort reform. How many debates did you hear about tort reform when you were down there?
A lot of them. Tort reform was a huge thing at the Capitol this past year. And I was actually taking Georgia practice and procedure in law school at the same time. So I heard a lot about tort reform.
Yeah. So, first of all, if you're down there at the Capitol, take an opportunity to go listen to the debates in the state house, in the different houses, and in the committee meetings, even on a bill you don't want to hear.
Yes, and you can actually follow these debates online. They live stream all of the committee hearings. So that's something that's very accessible no matter where you are. And
that's a great point, because before you go down to the legislature to speak in a committee hearing, listen to how they work. They're not, like you see on TV with congressional debates and people screaming at each other. It doesn't happen. I don't ever remember hearing anybody raise their voice in a committee meeting, except when somebody was disturbing the peace and they had to call the troopers to get them to calm down. It's a very interactive approach. The legislators want to hear from you. And a lot of times, one of the reasons to listen is that's where the edits are made.
Absolutely. You can see them in real time, raise questions, propose amendments, and they'll amend a bill in a committee hearing, and then you'll get it updated on the website later that day.
And, with a tort reform, we do a lot of catastrophic personal injury cases. We handle wrongful death cases, tractor trailer wrecks. We just settled a case for an officer, a very severely injured officer with a traumatic brain injury. So we were watching those debates and the tort reform. And what I want to say just about the tort reform, and I'm not getting into the politics of it. It doesn't matter to me which side you sit on. There's always something going on at the legislature that affects you. So putting your head in the sand and saying, well, I don't really like going down there is really not an option. Especially if you're a leader with an agency, especially if you are in an FOP. And there are groups that are down there all the time. The Georgia Chiefs Association, the Sheriff's Association, the prosecutors, they're there every day. So you can learn from them. You can join those groups. The FOP is always active in these legislative sessions, but it's incumbent upon you to learn. You don't want to read in the paper, oh, they passed a bill that fundamentally changed my job.
Yes, you have a voice in these situations, and you can step forward and use it. You're the best person to advocate for yourself. So we're encouraging you to do that.
Yeah, ask the dumb questions.
Yes.
And get ready for some dumb questions that really aren't dumb. People are just naive.
Mhm.
All right, so let's talk about some of the logistics, some of the top 10 things that you need to know if you go into the legislature. Why you mastered this website and you kept me knowing where to go at the Capitol. You got to tell your boss where to go, which a lot of people
I
want to do that
know
on a
we're
regular
going here
basis.
then. No, you're going the wrong way. So yes, very familiar with the Georgia General Assembly website. Use it. It has all the information that you need. They make it very accessible. And again, with that website, you can get the contact information for all of the key legislators. You'll find their email addresses, their phone numbers, and you can find information for their legislative assistants. A lot of legislators will have a legislative assistant, and they will either have 4 to 8 legislators that they assist with. So it's good to know that person. They can take a look at the schedules for that person and fit you in somewhere if you need to speak with them.
And that's a really good point too. Do not assume that your state rep has 17 people working for them that can help them.
Yes.
A lot of times you're dealing with one person at the desk.
Yes.
And as you said, 4 or 5 legislators that they're supporting with phone calls and emails and helping them with their schedules. So be patient. Recognize that you may do a lot of sitting and waiting,
Mhm.
and you may do a lot of walking in the hallways.
Yes.
Current contact information for the legislators. Georgia, and this really applies, remember, this applies to all states. There's going to be a booklet someplace that's going to tell you where their offices are, what their phone numbers are, what their public email is. And if a legislator gives you their private cell phone, don't share it without permission. I mean, a lot of times they're going to give you that as a law enforcement officer or as an attorney representing law enforcement because they care and they want to make sure you have a direct access to them. So respect their privacy, because remember that especially in a state with a limited session, you're not going to get access to them if you really make it difficult for them to have any off time.
Yes, absolutely. They're very busy. So being respectful of their time, they'll be respectful of yours.
All right, so committee schedules.
Yes. So as I've said, all of the committee schedules are posted on the Georgia General Assembly website. They're updated daily, minute by minute as things change. So that's pretty much the most accurate place you can go for information about various committee hearings and who's on the committee hearing.
And the schedules constantly change. I can remember sitting for 2.5 hours because a committee got moved because of a debate in one of the houses. I think it was the House of Representatives.
Yes.
They had a debate that went longer than they thought.
Yes.
And that's their job, folks. It's not to make sure that your schedule is kept. So everybody on the committee was delayed. Everybody on that committee was delayed, which meant everybody on everybody other's committee was delayed. So we wound up in a committee room with about 60 people waiting for the legislators to show up. And remember, when they get there, they need to take a breath.
Yes.
Let them catch their breath. Let them, sit down and do their jobs and things because, they're running 1,000 miles an hour too.
They definitely are. So
what about living on call? I love that term that you've coined.
Yes. So you will just randomly get calls from a legislator or a House rep, senator saying, oh, they're hearing this bill in the Public Safety Committee tomorrow. I need you there. I need you to speak on it. And okay, I can be there tomorrow. I'll make it work with my schedule. And a lot of times that will happen with you hearing maybe a day's notice at most. So that's something that's very important, is being flexible with your schedule and understanding that they're giving you the information when they have it too.
And we're very fortunate in my office, Ken Davis, who's a retired law enforcement officer and the managing attorney at the firm. He was able to stand in a couple of times when I had this thing called court.
Yes.
And I just wasn't able to go. But it was very important for a representative to be there from the FOP to answer these questions. And even if you can't make that meeting or the committee meeting comes up, you didn't hear about it, go find out who is in the meeting. Go look at the video, find out what questions they have and try to answer them. And something that I'm going to tell you that's very difficult to do. If you're one of these people who takes pictures of your food before you eat it, this is going to sound very strange to you, but sometimes you want to stay off social media about your legislative efforts. unless you need to garner support, sometimes it's best to work behind the scenes, do your work at the legislature. You don't have to share or overshare because you may wind up garnering the attention of some groups that have no idea what you're doing.
Yes.
And then you may wind up tanking your own efforts.
That's
Just
very
because
true.
because, just something simple, you may have so many people show up at the committee meeting, you can't get anything done. All right, time to get through security.
Yes, there is always a line for security. As I said earlier, sometimes the Capitol looks like an amusement park. So just making sure if you have a committee starting at 12:30, get there a little early, give yourself time to figure out where you're going, and give yourself time to make it through security.
And one that is another thing that I will definitely point out, if you are armed and you are going to the Capitol, it's generally not going to be a problem, but make sure you know which door to go through. Is there a special place you have to sign in? I know there's a lot of law enforcement officers here, and if you're going to carry a gun inside the Capitol, you want to just figure that out ahead of time. And sometimes you need to check up the schedules so you're not behind 75 school kids who are trying to get in there and they're all getting screened.
Yes.
Another one is to dress professionally.
And wear comfortable shoes. I did make a mistake of wearing heels a couple of times. You don't sit much unless you're in a committee hearing and if there's an open chair for you and you're walking on marble floors. So just do yourself a favor and don't wear shoes you need to break into the Capitol.
There is a female legislator who I think a lot of, and she's very, very sharp and she dresses very well. And if you look down, she is wearing athletic shoes every day.
Comfort.
I can remember going to the legislature and I think my app told me I had climbed like 25 stairs.
Yes.
Flights of stairs.
I knew I would get a lot of steps in at the Capitol.
It's a lot. And that's why you went, clearly, was to get your steps
Absolutely,
in.
to get my steps in.
A breakfast spot. Very, very good tip for those of y'all that do not know. Legislators have to eat and they get coffee. So find a breakfast spot nearby you can go to. In Georgia, there's a couple little cafeterias you can get to. And you may have somebody whose schedule is set out for them by their staff from 8 o'clock in the morning until 8 or 9 o'clock at night. But if you can catch them at 7 in the morning, a lot of times you get a chance to really kind of have a chat before they start getting absolutely crazy.
Yes, absolutely.
And once you talk about parking.
Yes, so there are a few parking areas around the Capitol. Definitely something that you want to look at beforehand, especially around the Capitol in Georgia. You get down there and there's a bunch of one-way streets. So it's easier to have a plan in place when you're heading down there. It helps save time and it helps keep you in the zone.
And have a backup.
Yes, have a backup.
Because we've had a couple of times when, there'll be a protest going on, there may be a wreck and something's shut down, especially if you have to get there for a committee meeting, I will tell you, get there as early as you possibly can. The other thing I will really, really encourage you to do, if you have the ability to have some place that you can sit, I want to thank Senator Randy Robertson for giving us an opportunity to sit a few times when we were just waiting on committee meetings. It's very, very helpful.
He also always shared snacks, and that was greatly appreciated.
Well, everybody loves snacks.
Yes.
But it's important to have a place that you can sit because you will be waiting. But then the other issue with that is if you have someone who can drop you off and then come pick you back up, sometimes you may need to do that in order to just make sure you make your meeting. So I think that we have some questions that have popped up and wanted to make sure that we get a chance to do them. I know one of the questions people have said is, I don't really know how to write a bill. I don't know how to put a bill into form. What would you recommend after seeing us go through this process?
Well, first I would say welcome to the club. I figured out how to put a bill into form and it took me a great deal of time. I was able to find a template online. And that's another thing. Sometimes just Googling something will give you a lot of options to work from. So I found a bill template, formatted it based off of what I saw Georgia doing, and I was able to put our information into that format.
So what about the individuals, and you dealt with this, the legislators who said, hey, I'm on board. I love this bill. You're the subject matter expert. I need you there.
Yes. Yes, that happened a lot. These are, as we've been saying, these legislators are very busy people. They want you there. They want you to talk about the bill. They want you to be there to answer any unanticipated questions. So they really want your input and your support through the process. So just being there to answer questions, again, the one pager, being able to hand them information to reference during these committee hearings is very beneficial for them.
And not all legislators are lawyers, are they?
No, these legislators come from a wide range of backgrounds, which is awesome because they're people just like you working at the Capitol.
Yeah, I really think that it gives the law a flavor. Now, sometimes it's a little difficult because you're trying to explain a very, like the Brady Giglio.
Yes.
There were legislators who were not in the law field at all, who had no idea about the disclosure requirements. So you have to start at ground zero.
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
you can't explain what you're trying to do with a Brady Giglio bill unless you explain what Brady disclosures are.
Yes, you can't pass go without that.
And don't be afraid to reach out to, and I'm not even going to say the opposition. There may be a group that you think is opposed to this. So I'm going to praise the Prosecuting Attorneys Council. They've been very easy to work with. The Attorney General, Chris Carr, and his staff were tremendous in helping us figure out who the stakeholders are. And a lot of times you don't know who they are unless you ask. And that question, like we said, who else do I need to talk to? But a lot of times that ability to go from ground zero to educating somebody starts with what is their stake in this? What do they need to hear? And I'm going to use the Brady Giglio bill and the Prosecuting Attorneys Council as an example. They said, hey, you know, we're willing to do training and put that in the bill to make sure our folks know how to use this new law.
Yes, Brady Giglio bill is a great example of compromise in this legislative session. We came forward with an idea and they collaborated with us and it became what it is today. And yeah, it was really great working and really honing out the details on that.
Yeah, we enjoyed working with them, and we especially want to thank Attorney General Chris Carr and his staff. Jordan Watson in particular was just very, very helpful. And if you don't have someone like down at the Capitol, start building those relationships today. Well, surprisingly, we are at 1 o'clock, so I want to kind of give a little post-webinar information. If you signed up, you will be signed up for the Blue Line Lawyer e-newsletter, and hopefully that will give you some good information. We have our disclaimer, which Chloe has read in fantastic format the first time, so we don't need to read it again. The FOP Legal Defense Plan, we're going to put that slide up again, folks. The price is going up just a little bit, January 1. It is hard to imagine going on the street without having a way to protect you. And Chloe sees this all the time. We have officers who are charged with a crime. We are defending a couple of them right now. They have done absolutely nothing wrong. They are victims of political prosecutions. But defending a shooting case, defending a murder case can cost in excess of $100,000, $200,000, sometimes $400,000 or $500,000. So the FOP Legal Defense Plan is unlimited. Our Force Forum, we encourage you to be there, come down to the Georgia coast, get some great seafood. And it's Jekyll Island. It's in April of 2026. We'll have our slide up there so you can grab the QR code. We have had, every year, we always have something about resiliency. We have officers who have been through horrible situations. Every year, we always have nationally renowned speakers come. And then every year we bring an officer or two or three who have been through an investigation. They've been through a prosecution. They've been through being vilified in the media, because it's important for individuals to understand exactly the human toll that this takes on our officers. So you can go ahead and save your early bird seat. The title will be coming out very soon. The topics come from you. Somebody asked, is it the same seminar every year? Of course not. I'd be bored out of my mind. That wouldn't work. Plus, it has to be for you. So we explore things with our partners throughout the United States, law enforcement and law enforcement attorneys. What is on their minds? What can we do as a think tank to help them? The last slide I want to put up is some information about the firm that you just saw. And we don't see any other questions in here, but remember, you will get an email with all of the white papers and all of the information and data. Chloe, I want to thank you for your assistance.
Thank you for having me.
Well, and I want you to thank you for being the executive protection for Bill. And you will see Bill back down at the Capitol this year. We're going to come back with our our Halo bill.
Yes.
And if you know of some bills that you think are important in Georgia or in your state, have the courage, have the foresight, have the ability to say to yourself, if it's important to me, it's probably important to others, and a legislator wants to hear about it. Make the relationships now. I want to thank our legislators who have supported us, especially a couple of them that who are on here now. If we can do anything for you at LoRusso Law Firm, please don't hesitate to contact us. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.